Hi, and thank you for joining our educational webinar on mental health and coping during COVID-19 with Dr. Bela Sood from Children's Hospital of Richmond at VCU and Clair Norman from Cameron K. Gallagher Foundation. My name is Sharnice Smith, and I am a member of VCU Health's marketing team. Before we begin the presentation, I would like to first make note that we will hold all questions until the end. Please feel free to drop any of those questions in the comments, and we will address them during the Q&A. Dr. Sood is a psychiatric physician, senior professor for child and mental health policy, and interested in reducing the stigma around mental health issues, outcomes research, mood disorders, and ADHD. Claire Norman is Hi. Claire Norman is a director of visions and strategy and certified mindfulness coach at the Cameron K. Gallagher. Thank you both, Dr. Sood and Claire, for joining us today. I will now turn the show over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharnice, for your introduction. And certainly, I think we, along with the rest of the world, are in a situation where we are really faced with a highly unnatural event. But this has become the new normal. It becomes really important for us to have a conversation as to what to do, as we have been faced with something which is, I think, a universal equalizer. Although we do know that certain sections of the population don't feel very equal as they are experiencing the pandemic. There are lots of areas where some people are singularly affected, whereas others are doing or are in a situation where things have gone much better. So, what can families do? So, this conversation is really something that we all are discovering together because we have never experienced anything like this. However, this is really an opportunity for all of us to practice sort of the notion of resilience that when you meet up with an obstacle, how do you not bang your head against it, but really learn ways of moving around it so that you can be successful? And so I'm just going to present some things which will hopefully will be helpful pointers for all of us. So we certainly know that COVID has impacted children and the families we work with in a manner because we all have lost the sense of life as we have known it. Our schedules are different. The type of challenges we face are different. It has produced inordinate amount of loneliness because we don't have touch. We don't have those senses working for us, which we take so for granted. There are loss of friendships because some of them are very much dependent upon face-to-face contact. And you can imagine with kids, when they don't play with each other, it's out of sight, out of mind. Particularly for teenagers, there has been a significant loss in the way of not having graduation for seniors. When you can't celebrate your birthdays the way you have always known how to do so. And a variety of different things like anniversaries, things which are important sentinel events in people's lives. We just have not been able to do them the same way. Loss of meeting extended families, grandparents who are at risk, who we can't see, and sometimes a much more sobering issue, which is the loss of life. There are obviously people who have lost mothers, who have lost fathers, who have lost siblings, and certainly grief and bereavement of that have no measure. And it really puts into play events which we never had anticipated. Fear, anxiety obviously follow those. Sometimes people can get very sad, they can get depressed, they can isolate themselves. And sometimes the anxiety comes out in the way of aggression, anger, because people can't make sense of this newness to the whole experience. And some people, and I've seen that in my practice, that there are some children and families who are actually taking the COVID pandemic and turning it into something positive. Particularly some children who tend to be anxious have liked the sense of being at home and not being in school where there are things which they find extremely stressful. The schoolyard bullies being one. So they just feel like this is wonderful, and this has really been a very positive experience for them. As people are getting more into the pandemic, they're learning creative ways of handling stuff. And so we are perhaps turning the corner in having some positive outcomes of the way the pandemic seems to us. So, for families, and we all know that not all children are made the same, they're temperamentally different, and they are, unlike adults, moving through development at a very rapid pace. So, a 3-year-old would look very different from an 8-year-old, who would look very different from a 15-year-old, because the developmental tasks are very different. And so it becomes very important for parents to really stand in the shoes of their child and understand what age, as well as what is the temperament of the child, and how do they take transitions and changes. Do they take them in their stride, or are they kids who tend to really do poorly with transitions? So you have to know your child, and obviously you do. So it's very important to look into why um, one size does not fit all within all of this. So just keep this in the backdrop in your mind as I talk about some general statements, which hopefully will connect the two, meaning what's the age of your child, and so on and so forth. Particularly younger children tend to do very well in conversations with their parents, whereas a teenager might not want to talk to you at all about stuff that might be going on, which is which is sensitive or which is problematic. They'd rather kind of turn to their peers in speaking about them. But with a younger child, or particularly any child, when they begin to experience sadness or unhappiness, or look troubled, it's very important to acknowledge their feelings. Don't say, oh, it'll be all okay. Just acknowledge the feelings and tell them, reinforce to them the notion that it is okay to have big bad feelings. But most importantly, how do you handle those big bad feelings is really important. And that's that conversation between the parent and the child, which needs to occur at its pace. It needs to occur without stress. And you may not have all the answers for it, but that availability of the parent to the child becomes very important. Use the opportunity to discuss why are they feeling this way. And this is a great opportunity to teach children coping strategies and skills which will always stay with them throughout their lives. So this is an opportunity to know your child's temperament and really tailor your comments to that. So when things go awry and things aren't going the way that you like, or where you get concerned about, is where you begin to see the advent of a depressive type of a presentation. And depression can take many forms. When you kind of watch your child glob onto the television exclusively, which is different from the baseline personality, where they don't want to do anything. They don't want to be with the family. They just kind of go to the room and are exclusively on video games, which they play just kind of endlessly, or curl up into a fetal position, not want to talk with you. Or again, different from their baseline personality, become sort of aggressive and make statements such as, I don't want to talk to you, leave me alone. And there's minor physical aggression, or they used to enjoy, going out and shooting hoops and no longer want to do that. They just want to remain within the home. All of those things should make a parent alert and exploring of, is this normal for my child or not? If there's a displaced frustration, generally you see it like, the sort of proverbial, when you have had a bad day at the office, you come and kick the couch or you kick the dog. It's really not the couch or the dog which is problematic, but it is you're bringing in and projecting and displacing your anger onto something else. So you'll see things like that in a child, and they become sort of, you take a double take because you haven't seen this side of them where they're displacing their feelings onto something inanimate. Resistance, where you can't really make me do this, I don't want to do this. And remember, this particularly is true in amongst teenagers, where if you say the sky is blue, they'll say it's purple, and you better believe it. That becomes more exaggerated under stress. In younger children, there may be more fear and clinginess, and they're underfoot. They just will not leave you alone because their anxiety is sort of reaching a crescendo. So, what can a parent do? Because obviously, not all children are the same. And everything looks very confusing to the parent. They just don't know which way to turn. Is this the right thing to do or not the right thing to do? But I'll bring to your attention, you all have traveled by air, and usually when you do the safety drill, they always talk about the oxygen mask. And they always say that before you can be helpful to your child who's sitting next to you, you have to put on your own oxygen mask. And so it's very important for parents to reflect on your own feelings and the way you are as a parent. In order to be empathetic with your child's plight, you have to be much more mindful in what's going on within yourself. So take the time to process your own feelings. You might be feeling very stressed out. You might be feeling that things are unfair. You might be feeling that you are pulled in many, many different directions, but that's the reality of your life. And so you have to figure out what to do with this. And the way of sort of relaxing your mind and completely delinking from the stressors which are stopping you from making the right decisions, there are a variety of different things that you could do. Definitely phone calls with friends on one side of the spectrum, where you talk to them, you kind of find out what's going on with them. You might want to vent with them. Nothing like friends, good old friends to do that with. And then exercising, getting outside the home, walking in your neighborhood all by yourself, exercising, and most importantly, meditation. And Claire will be talking about that in just a bit. Meditation is a terrific way of really giving your mind the rest it needs, so that once you are clear and you are calm and watching, life the way it really ought to, to really put some reality spin to what's going on, and then being capable of turning to your child and being helpful, it's very important you take care of yourself. So when your head is a little clearer, you understand your child's reactions and behaviors better. So that's really a very important takeaway point. Take care of yourself, love yourself. As I said before, when do you seek the help of a professional if their behavior is different from their baseline personality? And what has this done to the child's functioning? Are they able to perform academically? Are they able to connect with their friends? How are they doing with the family? And then, if you see abnormalities within that, then it's time to kind of sit up and say, do I need to consult with someone? Validating their feelings becomes important, helping them accept the losses that I had mentioned earlier, and then really kind of turning to them and saying, "What can you and I do together so that we can make this better for you?" Engaging the child in that type of a dialogue will help them be part of the solution. And again, that's resilience. When you begin to identify a problem and then you're able to be part of the solution, becomes very important. Very important within the home is to establish routines. I've now seen a lot of households where the child who is 8 years old is going to sleep at 2 a.m. and waking up at 11 in the morning. Very important to reestablish routine, uh, normal waking up and sleeping times, getting them to get outdoors, engage in schoolwork, discussing things that are there for them to do within the home, such as chores, because once they become a part of the household, they become your extra arm, as well as they feel good about themselves. So I know it sounds like a pipe dream to get a child to do laundry, etc., but a little bit here and there is always a good thing. For pleasure, playing a board game with them, play charades. I love that stuff. And, create a new hobby. Find something that both of you can, the family can do together, which is pleasurable for everyone. So, gentle firmness, but unconditional love, so that you can see that as the day expands within the household, where there is not external mediators, you are going to find children taking liberties. And it becomes very important to understand that children are looking for your guidance. Modeling behavior is very important. When parents are on the cell phone all the time, WhatsApping or in texting others, they cannot expect their child to give up their phone. So, very important that you engender calmness, model good behavior, Reduce anxiety in your own way of dealing with things, which will go a long ways in encouraging your children to develop a problem-solving attitude as well as being responsible. So you have to kind of understand all of these things. Okay. So, Shanice, the next slide. Okay. Yeah. So people always ask that when you are at home, what all could you do? Certainly, use of technology in the right way. You have to also discipline yourself in making sure that you're not totally dependent upon that. And as I said, going outdoors is very important. Reimagining the community becomes very important. When I was younger and lived in India, we would always play with the neighborhood children. In this day and age, we generally try to hang out with our kids, tend to hang out with kids that they have in school, they have play dates, etc. But putting out flyers in your neighborhood and saying, can we develop a co-quarantine group where our children can play with your children and we make sure that they remain safe? So reimagining your community, that will allow you to develop better friendships with your neighbors, as well as help your children have a play group which probably will remain with them for a long, long time. We don't do that, but this is, I would think, a good way of reimagining your neighborhood. Maintaining social distance, but making sure that you and your child, do have time with your neighbors, exercising, yoga, meditation, walks with folks, with social distancing. And those are all obvious and because everyone is in the same boat. So, and they are worrying about their children. So, how do you sort of bring the community together? Zoom calls, texting friends, and really learning new skills, such as, my husband and I, for the first time in his life, he's been interested in gardening, which has never happened before. And we have discovered something which we can do together. Music, performance, writing, all of these things are new ways of testing stuff that you could be doing. Okay. Okay, and then of course, taking care of your own body, engage with, try and develop some system within your home where you can, give massages to each other, extra care of pet, walking, running. I've heard a lot of people talk about how much they have discovered and rediscovered things that are there at home. Watching television shows, reading books, sipping herbal tea, warm scented baths, which you did not never had time for. You could try those out. Sleep hygiene and giving yourself some rope there. Learn to love yourself. It's okay when you don't do things perfectly. Self-compassion, compassion for others, all of those. Writing and doing art projects, needlework. Sometimes we have forgotten that art completely, but rediscovering that photo album compilation, and most importantly, planning for the future. What will happen when this pandemic ends and you're back again to square one, like how you knew life? What are the things that you've learned during this pandemic that have worked for you, which is good, which you would like to retain for the future? And that's a really positive message for yourself. Things that were completely superfluous, which we were doing all the time, and which were keeping us busy needlessly. What would we like to retain from this pandemic? Things, positive things that we have learned. So I'm going to leave you with that thought to be thinking to yourself as to what could you possibly retain. I have a couple of things myself.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Sood. What a wonderful collection of information and such powerful input and suggestions, and to frame this experience that we're all having together with such common human suggestions on ways to navigate the stress of this time. And now I get the great pleasure of representing the Cameron K. Gallagher Foundation. My name is Clair Norman. I'm the Director of Marketing. I have I have advanced professional training in mindfulness from mindfulness-based stress reduction from UC San Diego Center for Mindfulness. And besides the study and the continuing study that I do in this work, I am a diligent practitioner and a firm believer in these practices. So I'm honored to have been invited and very eager to share some of these practices and some of these concepts that really do marry well with what Dr. Sood set us up to have in these days of unusual and uncertain times. So thank you to the Children's Hospital of Richmond at VCU for putting together this marvelous community education series. We at the Cameron K. Gallagher Foundation believe that all change starts with a positive, supportive conversation. And I would say that we're kicking a really great one off tonight. So thank you all. I'd like to, before we jump into some of these concepts and defining what mindfulness is, perhaps we'll jump right in and do a simple, short, what we like to call an arrival practice. We've just been presented with some rich information that we might be feeling attached to some concepts or points we don't want to forget from Dr. Sood. We might be wondering what I might be saying and bringing to the table, or we might have a child or a pet in the room that needs some attention. But all of it working together, it may produce a moment, an opportunity to just arrive in this next moment where we can be fully present to life as it's unfolding. And it's truly as simple as this. Wherever you are, if you're buzzing about the kitchen or taking care of some tasks around the house, perhaps just stop for now and seated or standing, bring your attention to your feet. Next, bring your attention, please, to the quality of your breath. And don't try to change it. It is perfect just like it is. And just kind of notice the quality of your breath in this very moment. Maybe notice your heartbeat. Maybe notice if you have any kind of leaning to what has just been said or what's about to happen. And if at all possible, taking a long, beautiful, deep inhale, and then exhaling any kind of anxiety or unknown feelings, bringing your attention fully to your feet and where your feet are in this very moment. And so in this way, as we release the practice, just deepening the breath and relaxing into the next few moments, releasing the practice of arriving, perhaps reminding ourselves each time we wander that we come to this very moment. And ladies and gentlemen, we've really just begun. It might be your first mindful moment of your life. It may be 1/1,000,000th moments, but they're all on a loop. And so we'll start this evening with what is mindfulness? You've heard perhaps a lot about the concepts of mindfulness. It's been called a lot of things, and none of them are wrong. A practice of awareness. It's a practice of focus building. It's a practice of present moment living skills. But Jon Kabat-Zinn, who really is responsible for bringing these concepts and these practices to the West in the early 70s, calls it what you see here. Mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Now, each of those words is intentionally put in that sentence, but perhaps the most important thing to notice is the nature of the word paying attention. That ing on the end helps to demonstrate that mindfulness is on a loop. Mindfulness practice is about coming back. It's about paying attention. It's not necessarily about getting to a particular place. It's a particular way of noticing how life is around you. So in this way, mindfulness will not reduce stress. Mindfulness practices will help us navigate stressful situations. And these practices are very specific, and they're very attainable, and they're available for anyone. So what I like to show with this graphic on the slide, it's one of my favorite depictions of what mindfulness is. The image on the left with the 2 L's in mindful is of someone thinking about a million things at once. And I bet We're all guilty of that, perhaps even in this moment. The image of the person on the right has much less happening in the brain space. And with that one L of mindful, that person is likely fully present to the moment at hand. And so these practices of working toward being mindful with one L is sort of a slowing down and a clearing of unnecessary information, a clearing of noise that might cause anxiety. And what about this noise? Our next slide will show us that the noise that comes with stressful situations, we can work with that. With anxiety, especially around this pandemic, anxiety is a part of life. We know this. Anxiety especially belongs right now in COVID-19 environments. It's an unknown. There's health risks. There's questions about right behaviors and ethical community health. How are we going to show up when we do need to be places in person? So there's some questions and there's some don't know attitudes. But the thing about anxiety as well, we need to understand over time, anxiety has been a message of protection for us as a species. When those stressful feelings show up in our body, they have a purpose. They're like an alarm signal that tells us that something's not quite right. There's something that deserves our attention. And oftentimes, the skill that mindfulness practice will give us is to discern what actually requires our attention to keep us protected and safe. Oftentimes, the extra noise is unnecessary, but perhaps based on patterns or a tendency to worry about the past, which is where depression tends to show up, or a tendency to worry a lot about the future, which is where a lot of anxiety and anxious feelings will show up. But essentially, those mechanical, visceral, biologic feelings of anxiety are here to protect us. So let's not stigmatize anxiety. It belongs right now. And further, why not meet the experience of anxiety with some curiosity? Maybe when it shows up, we begin to just notice that it's here. It's here and it belongs. And we don't judge ourselves or the situation for being anxiety inducing. We simply notice without judgment it has arrived. And then a next step may be to do a gentle exploration on, oh, I wonder where this is coming from. And then just walk yourself through a process, down a journey, and maybe be able to pinpoint something very specific, devoid of drama and devoid of extra plot that you might put into a situation. And just gently walk yourself to the source of the anxiety. And then we can begin to overlay the mindfulness practices. And in this way, we are beginning to open ourselves up to new reactions to anxiety. And we're no longer perhaps just repeating old patterns when certain feelings show up. So this noise, this extra noise that happens in our mind, the mind spinning, the things that we seek to use mindfulness to help quiet, will also help develop these other aspects to our skills. A non-judgmental way of experiencing the world, perhaps meeting things with a tinge of curiosity over judgment. And then also just doing that nice exploration, that sense of just taking a personal journey and really unveiling what is it that's causing this in this moment and what can I do to help that. And so moving to slide 3, we're starting to really show what these practices are. What can you do in the moments of anxiety? Well, many of you might already know this, but the foundation of all mindfulness meditation and mindfulness practice is the breath. And I'm sure you have heard quite often how important it is to cultivate a healthy inhale and exhale. And if maybe your exposure to mindfulness isn't quite that even yet, I might surmise that many of us have heard a family member suggest when we seem to be keyed up, oh, why don't you take a deep breath? We've heard that advice a lot, I imagine. But what we might not have heard is that the breathing out longer is really the key. So the science of the breath is fascinating. We can spend a long time on the breath, but we won't. But I will let you know that your body is brilliant. And the breath, the very activity that you do constantly on a loop, remember that paying attention definition of mindfulness? It's on a loop, really, and certainly is your breath. So if we always have access to anchor ourselves through paying attention to the breath, we are always available to a mindfulness practice, a mindfulness benefit. So the reason that long exhale will help you in an anxious moment is your biology. Your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest, which is also associated with the relaxation response, comes into play on the longer exhale. So we are literally tripping our relaxation response to come on to play when we have an extended exhale. So this is why the breath, not only is it continuously available to you on a loop, but the biology of being able to extend your long exhale will help literally calm your heart rate in a moment of anxiety. So breath practice can be studied separately, and we have some opportunities for that at the Cameron K. Gallagher Foundation and some other organizations, plenty of YouTube videos. So please take a moment and learn a little bit about perhaps breathing in for a count of 4, holding for a count of 2, exhaling for a count of 6, called the 4-2-6 breath. And there are many variations of that. A second mindfulness practice is to anchor yourself in the natural world. And that simply means to get outside. And perhaps like tomorrow when the weather's going to be a little bit iffy, just look to the things inside your home that might be a plant or even fruit, something that represents the natural world. So for some people, it might be they might have a special stone they've collected or a shell from a beach trip, something that you've brought inside from the outdoors that anchors you to that sense of rhythm and natural processes, which is much like the breath. So we do these things intentionally to help anchor us back to the present moment, making us better able to make good choices and judgments on what is happening and what will our next move be. And the next move might be to name your emotion at the time and then explore what it means. How is it showing up in the body? And for me, I know broadening my vocabulary of emotion words or sensation words is very helpful. So having adjectives that might describe your feeling, like I feel fluttery in my stomach, or I feel really open in my back, or I feel really tense, or I feel very loose and soft right now. So there's this wonderful article put out by the Mindfulness Institute about these naming the emotions through sensation words that just broadens our ability to explore the experience. So I might suggest maybe a word search or maybe some time spent on broadening that emotion sensation vocabulary. And then Dr. Sood and many of us know, those endorphins that get released with exercise are the first line of defense with anxiety and depression. So being able to move your body to some extent will always help, and that is very much a mindful practice. Doing this on purpose with a layer of mindfulness sort of levels up the movement. I'm going to demonstrate one simple practice that's helpful to use when you're outdoors. It actually can be used indoors as well, which is where I'll show it to you. I'll step back for just a moment. This practice is called the root while you rise practice. So in this way, we stand on our 2 feet, best to actually be without your shoes and best to be outdoors. So we've connected with nature and we're able to feel our feet rooted exactly where we are in the physical space of your surroundings and in this moment. So we root where we are. And from that place of root, we take an inhale and we rise the arms high. So just a simple inhale and rise high. Now, as I exhale, I may disappear from your screen, but when you inhale and rise high, and then bend your ankles, knees, and hips to touch the ground below. And when you touch the ground below, spend a moment and pat the ground with your hands to really feel the ground. And then slowly rise high and do it again. Inhale, so we root to rise and we come down to the floor or the earth outside and just literally tactily touch the space where your feet do stand. And this way, with a couple of breaths, we've incorporated a breath practice. We've incorporated the natural world. We've taken a moment intentionally to pay attention on purpose, non-judgmentally, like John Kabat-Zinn would suggest. And we might be able to put space between the presenting anxieties, or maybe just you're developing a longer, more skillful way to be mindful. So that's the root to rise practice. And then finally on this slide, something to mention when you're outside especially, is to notice everything around you and cultivate this sort of sense of awe. You know, if anything, noticing the sun and the clouds and the weather and what's around you and the vastness of the sky, kind of cultivating this sense of awe. And there's some real science behind exploring these new topics and learning new things that Dr. Sood had also suggested as coping skills. So the science behind the sense of awe is that a lot of times it can lead to an increased sense of happiness and generosity in your own life when we've cultivated a sense of seeing in perspective what is really truly awesome around us. And we do this intentionally. So breathing, knowing the biology of your breath, getting outside, and when you can't, touching or being near something that is of the natural world, drinking water, it would be a practice in that way. Learning a larger and using a vocabulary that's very specific to your sensations, how you're feeling, your emotions, moving your body, and cultivating a sense of awe. Just a couple of slides left. We'll move on to the next one. So specific mindfulness activities. We've talked about the breath practice. There's a number of ways we can do that. You don't have to have 10 or 20 minutes to sit still and cultivate a meditative space, but just knowing intentionally 5 or 6 of these long 4 to 6 breath work, that's a wonderful way to settle into a breath practice. And you might want to layer in, as Dr. Sood also suggested, some compassionate thoughts as you're breathing. Maybe layer in a mantra or a phrase that's quite meaningful to you. Maybe as you inhale, you can say something like, "May I be healthy." And then when you exhale, you might want to say, may you be healthy. And then we go on to the next one and say, "May the planet get all the nourishment it needs." Exhale, "May I get all the nourishment I need." And so you get the drift. There's sort of a layering in of kind of a compassion and an extension out practice, layering the breath in with those phrases. So again, these take a couple of seconds to do and start to incorporate in your daily life. And those wonderful benefits of parasympathetic nervous system stimulation, of skillfully knowing a better way to maybe handle stress and navigate the world, start to become, the skills build over time. So you'll begin to see these benefits. So the next thing is sort of some tactile things, some wonderful games. We'll go back, if you don't mind, Charnice, to the other slide. I'm almost done, the one right before. So some of the games and creativity. One of the things we do at the Cameron K. Gallagher Foundation is we teach kids how to build these, we call them mindful breath beads. And it's done with the simplest of supplies, just taking a string and putting together some plastic beads, or it can be another kind of decorative bead that you might have an affinity for, whatever it could be, but at least 6 beads in a row. And the whole family can get in on the act. And this becomes sort of a breath bead reminder. And you would inhale holding one bead, exhale moving to the next, inhale and exhale. So you kind of get the drift. And this essentially becomes a fidget toy too. And we all know that sensation, that tactile feeling, is a good way to start to settle also a racing heart. So this is one way. Another, we'd mentioned holding a stone, and we've all been perhaps seen these wonderful reminders out in the world. You can paint the rocks and stones. So these kind of creative ways to connect with these anchoring to nature mindfulness practices. And also one of my favorites, which is a little much to kind of demonstrate here, but I'll just briefly summarize, is to make a wonderful eye pillow. Dr. Sood talked about sleep hygiene, and you can take a simple sock and fill a sock with some rice or flaxseed or something that could give it that sensation of a pillow feeling. And once you fill the sock, you could put some essential oils, some wonderful smell in there. Put a rubber band at the top of your sock, tie a decorative ribbon, and you have actually made yourself a wonderful mindfulness tool that helps to relax at nighttime. So there are these great games and art projects that we can do. And then finally on this slide, getting out in nature we had talked about. There are things you can do on family walks. Maybe we do things like identify the softest sound in your environment. Maybe we ask people on the walk to only focus on one sense at a time for every block that you pass, for every block in your neighborhood, or from mailbox to mailbox, sight only this time. Then your sense of hearing only for the next section. Third section may be feeling into the softness under your feet, whether you have shoes on or not. So the sense of touch, and then the sense of smell. And so just, you get the drift, kind of layering on some sensation development on these kind of being out in nature also. So finally, this next slide, building these mindfulness skills, there's some practical applications here. So for some of us, a lot of this language might be a little something we're not really used to, or maybe it's something that doesn't resonate as much, but some of these things on this slide are actually mindfulness practices without the mindfulness language. And so you'll be getting some of these great benefits over time by doing these practices. So just being able to see, I won't go through all of them, what these mindfulness skill building can be in these other practices. One thing Dr. Sood had mentioned was some activities that help you kind of zone out and be able to really focus in on one thing at a time. Things like organizing your recipes or your photos, or something like bread baking, or things that are more practical and task-oriented, but as you focus on one at a time, we're building kind of a mindfulness skill set. So that's one way to just apply mindfulness benefits to more practical everyday activities. When we layer a single focus on each one, we are building mindfulness skills. So let's move on from this slide. And so our key takeaways today is that your body is brilliant. I mentioned that earlier with this wonderful built-in breath mechanism. And it truly is. So beginning to key into these mind-body moments where we're understanding when stress or anxiety shows up in a profound way, that we take a moment and locate where the stress lives in your unique body. And we might take a moment to send that breath relaxation response to that body part. And so that we're building that mind-body connection when we really understand how brilliantly engineered our bodies are. Secondly, that we do have the capabilities, all right here and now, to begin to cultivate these skills of navigating stress with mindfulness practices. So you really don't need me or a book or a video. The only thing you need is intentional focus on the breath with the desire to be more present moment to moment in your life. And you have begun. Consistency is the key. Mindfulness practice, like medicine, mindfulness practice, like vitamins, is dose dependent. One time and you'll get some terrific benefits from mindfulness practice. So already this evening, nice job. But the more you do it, the better it is for you. And you don't need 10 or 20 or 40 minutes a day. You simply need to layer an intentional skill building in the mindfulness realm on certain specific tasks you're already doing. And I might suggest that you will become inspired to carve out some specific still time, some specific quieter time, to really allow this mindfulness benefit to crawl into your body space so that you can move into the next requirement of your life more fully present. And the last thing I'll say is, the thing about mindfulness is, if you're practicing, your family will benefit. We are not suggesting that you take this on and teach it and learn it and have to become the mindfulness captain of your family. But if you take it on as a benefit to yourself, your practice will inform benefits within your whole family and within your own relationships. Studies show that performance gets better. So much happens when we're able to be fully present and focused on singular tasks at a time rather than too much noise. Multitasking is actually a myth. Our brains are not wired to do two things at once. And what mindfulness helps us do is to singularly focus on one thing at a time and fully see each thing through, whether it's a conversation or a simple breath cycle, inhale to exhale. And so I hope as you move forward, you might consider taking on just an intentional, focused breath practice a few times throughout your day. And finally, the very last slide I have to share with you is that the Cameron K. Gallagher Foundation's Speak Up 5K, which is our flagship event designed by Cameron K. Gallagher herself, a 16-year-old girl who suffered greatly with anxiety and depression and got tremendous help from the wonderful caregivers at the Children's Hospital of Richmond. This fundraiser and wonderful event is virtual this year, and it's meant to bring communities together to do what Dr. Sood feels so passionately about, and that is to destigmatize mental health conversations, to bring these conversations into the open in positive, active, supportive environments. So Cameron designed this race. This is the 7th year we've put it on her behalf. She left us in 2014 due to an undiagnosed heart condition, but we carry on her legacy and her dream so that others don't have to suffer in whispered conversations, but more out in the open, in supportive dialogue. Cameron got a lot of benefit from mindfulness practice. I got the wonderful honor of working with her in private to help her develop some skills, and her outcomes were almost immediate when she learned to incorporate some of the anxiety-reducing breath work and some empowerment feelings when she knew she could focus on one thing at a time and make discerning, good judged decisions with some of these practices layered in. So thank you for listening to this piece of the mental health education series for Children's Hospital of Richmond at VCU. And we'll give it back to Sharnice and Dr. Sood.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Sood and Claire. That was such an informational and timely topic. I truly appreciate it. And now we're going to open the floor up to any questions. So we'll be reading questions in the comment section, along with a few that were submitted in advance. So the first question that we have, with COVID-19 has really affected children with the abrupt and scary changes in their lives. Do you have advice on how to help them cope? And I know, Dr. Sood, you mentioned this during your talk. If you can kind of give a takeaway for this question.
I mean, as we acknowledged, the whole pandemic issue is really unnatural. And so, how do you convert that into something which is here to stay? And how do you normalize it? And so, it becomes very important to concrete things like setting up schedules, um, talking to your children, validating their feelings and emotions. There are lots of losses which have occurred as a result of it, but there are also opportunities because I think we have kind of turned a curve on the road here because we've all become used to it. Now we have to start looking at opportunities and how we can kind of actualize those creative strengths within our children and ourselves to make this period something which we can take home and really come out of it feeling good um, about things we have created for ourselves in our lives.
Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And the next question we have, do you have any advice on what to do when a loved one has passed during this pandemic?
Well, Claire, I don't know whether you want to take it or you want me to speak to it.
I think you should.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think that any type of loss, anytime aside from the pandemic, is a major event in anyone's life and really sets into play what we call the stages of grief. And honestly speaking, people who are around the child and the family have to really serve as a support because grief has to run its course. And in some ways, you watch and you kind of support the individual. But as time passes, things get better and eventually leaves in its wake memories of the individual, which are very positive things and that have happened in their lives along with you. Um, that have been really positive. So eventually, you want to get to the point where it leaves behind good things about the person. But that whole journey of the grief and the bereavement is a process. And you're going to go through the stages of grief where there's shock, there's numbness, and to recognize that these phases are part and parcel of normal bereavement. Oftentimes, people talk about medications, and I firmly believe that that is not necessary, that you have to really sort of allow people to work that. After a while, the individual kind of goes through a level of, they kind of go through this bargaining and feeling, why did it happen to me? They have lots of conversations with God or higher powers about why this occurred, and that's just normative grieving. And then you reach a new level of adaptation where you come to terms with it and you kind of go along. Where things begin to really go awry and where you have to be concerned is when the person who's left behind begins to get worse over time, where they might want to join the loved one and that is suicidal thoughts, or that the depression kind of worsens and as time is passing things are not getting better, then people need to kind of sit up and pay attention to it and perhaps get some counseling. But generally speaking, extended family, people who love you, support you through that process. And obviously, loss is loss, and it's something that people have to deal with.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Flood. And another question that we have is, although restrictions are lifting, life still isn't back to normal. So how can we tackle feelings of loneliness? And I know you both covered that topic, so if you both want to elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, I think the feelings of loneliness have to do with our innate desire for connection. And, we're sort of wired for that, no pun intended. And right now our connection is dependent on technology. And as things do open up, I think what's most important from a standpoint of mindfulness is to be very intentional about how you want to express your own reentry and how your family is going to express their own within the confines of what our government and our governor tells us needs, what the phases are. We might have friends that are doing less than what is allowed because they might have extenuating reasons for that. So needs to be a heightened awareness of we're all kind of in this together with varying degrees of necessity to respond to things opening up. But that need for connection goes beyond just the dyadic kind of amongst people. We need to also connect with our community and be very aware of our and thoughtful and compassionate about our reentry phasing, and mindful of how we're all each kind of coming into these reconnections with gratitude of an ability to reconnect.
Yes, I agree. I think that Zoom meetings, those kinds of things can be very effective ways. I know I have done that with a lot of my friends in reconnecting or having social distancing, backyard, one-to-one type of meetings with people. And you have to be thoughtful about it because you can't have a party in your backyard, but you can certainly connect on a one-to-one. And those things are actually quite amazing in the sense that that one-to-one connection, we are rediscovering that mindfulness aspect of it, where you can actually have a conversation with someone rather than mill around mindlessly. And so this has been, at least for me, a great opportunity of rediscovering portions of myself which are quieter and more connected and actually surprisingly a much better place in my life. So I see a question here as it pertains to children and adolescents. What are your thoughts on limiting time and technology, which is always a hot topic? Oftentimes technology becomes a babysitter and we tend to kind of let children be on it. But it is a very good question. The American Academy of Pediatrics talks about 2 hours of screen time a day. Obviously, that has become very lax with the pandemic, and there's much more time being spent on technology. I think that 2 hours might not cut it, but you have to replace that the technology piece with something which is fun, which is attractive, which can really garner that attention that children so eagerly need. And so you have to be you have to be pretty creative in coming up with alternatives. But yes, technology can be mind numbing at times, and it should not be used as a babysitter. So 2 hours is what the AAP in actual, outside the pandemic has recommended. Should not be more than that. We ourselves are spending much more screen time, I feel, when my cell phone tells me how much of screen time have you used. It's a nice sort of prod to tell me too much on it. You need to get off. So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, we are running out of time. So Dr. Sood and Claire, it was such a pleasure having you join us for this webinar. And I'm glad that we were able to learn some coping tips and some stress managing exercises to help us manage, but also take care of our emotional health and our loved ones and the community. So to stay connected to VCU Health and the Children's Hospital of Richmond at VCU, you can follow each of their Facebook pages at VCU Health and at Children's at VCU. And to explore all the full range of mental health services, visit vcuhealth.org. Also, learn more about the programs and the support offered at Cameron K. Gallagher Foundation by visiting ckgfoundation.org. Once again, Dr. Sood and Claire, and to all who joined today, have a great night.
A pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.